The announcement of a new Doctor Who behind-the-scenes series unleashed a sigh of relief from the fandom at large. For 7 years, audiences were captivated by the process of making Doctor Who, thanks to Doctor Who Confidential, which, much like the new Doctor Who Unleashed, played on BBC Three shortly after the main episodes aired. It has long been upheld as an iconic part of the first half of the revival era, but with Doctor Who Unleashed on the horizon, perhaps it's time to look back and ask why Doctor Who Confidential was so important. Hello and welcome to what we affectionately like to call Virginity Corner, one of many in this house, let me tell you. The 60th anniversary specials for Doctor Who are on the horizon, with Russell T Davies
Funny.
returning to the showrunner seat, alongside some familiar faces in David Tennant as the 14th Doctor and Catherine Tate as Donna Noble.
We go and kick its ass!
I am unbearably excited for this, and that's without mentioning the upcoming 14th and 15th series with Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson. We are in for some dynamite Doctor Who in the near future, and I would like to talk about Doctor Who a little in the lead up to the 60th anniversary. So welcome to this, the first in a short series of videos about my favourite show. This time, as the cold open said, we're talking Confidential. Since May of this year, I have run a TikTok page dedicated to celebrating Doctor Who Confidential, the format being to take about a minute-long clip from whatever episode, caption it, and stick a title card background on it. I made it as an incredibly niche page to satiate a want and desire I had for Doctor Who Confidential content on TikTok. And then the page did a lot better than I expected, currently sitting at over 7,000 followers and over 300,000 likes. It has been a lot more successful than I ever anticipated, which really points to a desire within the fandom and the public at large for behind-the-scenes material for their favourite pieces of art. Obviously, behind-the-scenes material existed before the DVD, but the DVD boom and the rise of the DVD menu and bonus feature allowed for a greater range and amount of behind-the-scenes features than ever before. Whether that's the Lord of the Rings appendices, which essentially act as a mini film school, or the commentary track, things were never looking better for film and television fans wanting to learn how the things they watch were made. And Doctor Who is no stranger to this, with the classic Doctor Who DVD range being home to a cavalcade of special features, ranging from making-of documentaries to commentary tracks to studio footage. We were truly blessed. And it's in this environment that the revival series emerged. It was a media landscape primed for a behind-the-scenes companion series to flourish, and clearly flourish it did. Starting with Series 1, at this time Doctor Who Confidential was formed of 30-minute long episodes, all focusing around a specific topic relating to that episode. The first episode being about bringing Doctor Who back for the 21st century, the next two about monsters and the TARDIS, then the companion, and so on. Episodes around this time, owing to how little new Doctor Who there actually was, and certainly in the early episodes how little they could actually show, focused on comparing the revived series to the original run. There's a lot of here is how this aspect of the show is being adapted for the modern day, with interviews with the cast and crew from that original run. As the series went on, the runtime would increase to 45 minutes in Series 3, a dream for people looking to learn more about the filming of the show. If you're more of a fan for the original run, however, you're not in as much luck, with much of that talk of classic Who disappearing as the show had more clips from the revived series to pull, leaving more time in the episodes to learn how specific aspects of those specific episodes were made. Or at least, that's what you'd hope would happen. Since the very beginning of the show, a good chunk of the series was devoted to the musical montage, set to licensed pop music. This proved to be a problem, with the licensing only going as far as the initial broadcast of the episode. So, in the home media release, cut-down versions of the episodes were released, in part also to save space and fit all 13 episodes onto one disc. These would range from 5 to 15 minutes in length, and as such, cut a hell of a lot out. And these musical montages are questionable at best, and downright weird at worst, and either way, they are all painfully on the nose. From Dancing in the Street by David Bowie and Mick Jagger for the street party scenes in The Idiot's Lantern, or this, a montage of people sacrificing themselves for the Doctor set to Live and Let Die by Paul McCartney for Turn Left. If I'm ever talking about the musical montages in Confidential, I will always bring up the latter, because I think it's a prime example of just how weird a lot of the show is. Confidential wasn't even the only behind-the-scenes material at the time, with the DVD releases often including extra material and video diaries from the cast and sometimes crew, documenting a more raw, personal angle to the making of. And there was another show running simultaneously to Confidential that we will get back to later in the video. I can hear you screaming and we will totally get there, just you wait. But the format would stay the same through the first series of the Moffat era. It was Series 6, the final series of Confidential, where some slight changes would happen. Most noticeably, it featured new graphics and new interstitial transitions between segments. However, I think the main difference, helped by those transitions, was just how segmented the show became. The show was always somewhat segmented, bouncing from production element to production element, but with the narration and editing style it typically felt like a seamless transition between the various sequences. Not so for Series 6, with the new transitions providing clear demarcations between segments, making the show feel a little stilted as a result. And I understand why this is the case. Making your segments more clearly defined makes cutting them down for the home release a heck of a lot easier for the editing team. And by this point, making things easier and cheaper for themselves was all they could do, because the budget was strained. Doctor Who Confidential would not return for Series 7. The BBC cited cost-cutting measures as the reason for cancelling the series, despite protestations from the production team and the public, with the show being named the best BBC Three show ever by the public in 2013, 2 years after its cancellation. And then just a few years later, in 2016, BBC Three left terrestrial TV, so any hope of the Confidential format returning as it existed appeared to be dead in the water. The 2010s marked a clear shift in the media landscape, with streaming taking hold and physical media dying. The market for the bonus feature, despite people clearly still wanting that material, was crumbling. This was no longer 2005, but this is Doctor Who, and the Doctor Who fanbase is one that has an obsession with physical media and the bonus feature. There's a reason that these collection box sets are able to be made at such high quality. Doctor Who fans lap them up. So just because Doctor Who Confidential ended, that doesn't mean behind-the-scenes material ended. But for the revived series going forward, that behind-the-scenes material would limp forwards. Not quite dead, but not quite alive. It would go by many names. Behind the lens, extra, inside look, a closer look, and simply behind the scenes. But the idea across all of them was the same. It's bite-sized confidential. Ranging from around 2 minutes to 15, with most hovering at the lower end of that spectrum, many of these making-ofs, owing to their length, barely scratch the surface of how any of these episodes came to be. Certainly, for a lot of these, they essentially act as puff pieces for the episodes, rather than any actual in-depth discussion of how these episodes were actually made. I recently expanded out the type of material that I pull from for that TikTok page, from just Doctor Who Confidential to all revival Doctor Who era behind-the-scenes stuff. Being stuck just doing series 1 to 6 was frustrating. I love all Doctor Who and wanted to celebrate all Doctor Who, so in came your extras, your inside looks, your video diaries. But making my silly little TikToks out of these pieces of material was a lot more difficult than you might expect. The 2-minute puff piece just isn't as easily cut down to a 1-minute segment that gives you a good overview of a specific aspect of production. And besides that, a lot of it just isn't all that engaging. It's just people sitting in front of a background talking about how good they think the episodes are. You really do need a longer running time, as was afforded to that original Confidential run, in order to give any material the time to actually delve into an aspect of production, and certainly if you want to talk to someone that isn't above the line talent. One of my favourite Doctor Who Confidential segments, and one that expectedly didn't do as well on my TikTok page, was this, from Series 6, talking to the show's focus puller Steve Reese. I have long been of the opinion that focus pullers are the unsung heroes of media production, and Doctor Who Confidential gave them the time and the spotlight that they deserve, showing the human behind the hard work that goes into every aspect of production. Especially as a show they know is going out to kids and people who don't have any sort of film production knowledge, acknowledging the technicalities and process behind making the show outside of the flashier aspects is inspiring. It shows just how many opportunities there are, how many different angles and aspects of production that they can go into if they so wish. And further to this segment being one of the best in the show, so much of the show is focused around relationships. Whether that's between actors or producers, there's a good deal of time seeing these people interact and have a laugh. Another Series 6 episode is largely centered around Matt Smith, Karen Gillan, and Arthur Darvill sitting in a tent chatting about what they got up to over Christmas. But it's a rarity in the show to have even the slightest moment of connection between below-the-line talent, as they are naturally the less focused upon members of the crew. But in the Steve Reese segment, he takes a moment to have a quick interaction between him and his friends in the sound department. It's brief, but it highlights just how much of a family the Doctor Who crew becomes, working months on end to bring us the show we love. And in doing my TikToks, it also lets me appreciate these smaller crew members in ways I wouldn't have done before, as I will often have to search through crew lists on IMDb, as was the case here with Daffy Parry, and try and find the person speaking, who, without something like Confidential, would likely be largely ignored by the non-industry world for their work on the show. In 2022, following the success of programs like Fleabag and Normal People, BBC Three returned to the air. With it came renewed hopes that perhaps the channel's most beloved show of the original run would return in some capacity. And as the RTD2 era ramped up, these hopes only became stronger, as set reports told of a documentary crew on site. Though unlike Confidential, this was said to have a presenter at the helm. And then the name Doctor Who Unleashed was thrown around through the rumour mill. Hopes for the return of behind-the-scenes material to the airwaves was at a new high. Finally, on Wednesday, the 27th of September, the BBC confirmed that Doctor Who Unleashed, a new behind-the-scenes companion series, would be airing on BBC Three directly after new Doctor Who episodes aired, exactly in the same capacity as Confidential did back in the day. Unleashed is to be presenter-led, being helmed by BBC Radio 1 alum Stefan Powell, taking viewers around an Access All Areas look behind the scenes of the making of Doctor Who. It was also announced that it would have a running time of 30 minutes per episode, like Series 1 and 2 of Confidential. Whilst Confidential always had a narrator, it was very rarely presented. On rare occasions, such as the Series 3 episode Do You Remember the First Time, where David Tennant talked to the writers and producers of the show. But whilst Doctor Who Unleashed isn't a million miles away from Confidential, it also feels like an extension of the other mid-noughties behind-the-scenes companion show, which, unlike Confidential, was presenter-led. Totally Doctor Who was the other Doctor Who companion programme airing on CBBC the Friday after the respective Doctor Who episode aired on the Saturday. It ran concurrent with Series 2 and 3 of the main show, and was presented by Barney Harwood, with Liz Barker for Series 1 and Kirsten O'Brien for Series 2. The series took a more Blue Peter approach, featuring guest interviews, craft showcases, game show elements, and set tours. It is very much a relic of the time, and watching as an adult isn't all that rewarding, but as a kid it was great. Doctor Who was all over TV, and so much of it was focused on showing kids how the show was being made, with Totally Doctor Who letting kids interact with the cast and crew, and get to try out some of the more kid-friendly and fun techniques used for the show in some of its segments. It was also Totally Doctor Who where The Infinite Quest, the first of the two revival-era animated stories, aired, split into different parts across the series' run. Combining the two shows' styles, both the more in-depth behind-the-scenes look of Confidential, as well as the presenter-led angle of Totally Doctor Who, is a smart one, I think, as well as making the series stand apart from what has come before. I do imagine, though, that this will mean some of the more natural, fly-on-the-wall moments of the show, be that Karen Gillan calling Arthur Darvill
Could that be boy? Next question.
or the cast of Silence in the Library playing cards in between scenes.
Yes! Yes! That's how you play the game of cards! And then this happens and you go, woo-hoo-hoo! And you're on 10, and it's all looking very good.
Will be reduced with the presented aspect, and that is a shame. But I also imagine, and hope for the sake of having the full episodes on the Blu-rays, that the amount of licensed music montages will be significantly reduced, leaving more time for actual looks at the making of the show itself. Doctor Who Confidential was a great time and a weird time, and one that, despite nearly 10 years since its cancellation, hasn't been forgotten by the fandom or the public. And with the announcement of its addition to BBC iPlayer, I can only imagine that appreciation for the series will grow. I am so glad that Behind the Scenes Who is returning to our screens in at least some form, and I cannot wait to see a proper 30-minute long episode of a behind-the-scenes companion show where we actually get to see Rachel Talalay work. And luckily, there's not long to wait now at the time of posting. New Doctor Who is almost here, and I cannot wait, so please excuse me while I go and watch some of the old favourites, before switching the channel over to BBC Three to find out what kind of toothbrush the actors use.
I was using an electric toothbrush.
No, don't move it. No, keep it still.
Yeah.